Welcome! In this short video, we'll be instructing you on how to deploy WithSecure Identity Security for Entra ID and Elements XDR Cloud Security for Azure. Before we proceed, please note that you can find essential information on all WithSecure products from our user guides, the support site, and our technical training site. You'll find the links here. In this demonstration video, we'll be using a demo company, which has a subscription for both Identity Security and Azure Workload. First, we deploy just the resources needed for Identity Security, after which we will deploy the Azure workloads. So, the first step is to deploy Identity Security in Elements Cloud, and then add new Azure tenants. Start by choosing the display name for the tenant. For this demonstration, we'll name this tenant Demo Tenant. Then, we need to retrieve the tenant ID from the Azure environment. This can be found and copied from Microsoft Entra ID, and then it is pasted into the field in Elements. Click Next, and you can set the business importance for the tenant. Here, we'll keep it as normal. A wizard will appear, prompting you to connect to Identity Inventory. This is a mandatory step before we can add the Identity Security or Azure Workload capabilities. This window pops up automatically when you add a new tenant. Basically, it's asking us to give permission to the analyzer to retrieve user information from the Azure environment. Click Start. Next, we need to grant permission to the Azure application to access our Azure environment. This can be done in two ways. If the user who's doing the onboarding has all the privileges needed as an admin of the Azure tenant, it can be completed just by clicking to accept the permissions. If the user does not have this needed permission, they can copy the URL and send it to an Azure admin who does. The admin can then accept those permissions. For this demo's purposes, we have the admin privileges on the demo Azure tenant, so we will just accept the permissions, and it goes like this. First, sign in using your Azure Administrator account. Click Accept to approve the permissions needed by the scanner to get access to the Azure environment. Now, the permissions have been accepted and we can close the window. After a refresh, we have successfully connected to the Identity Inventory, and the connection status and application permissions are both shown as active. The next step is to connect to Identity Security or Azure Workload. For both of them, the onboarding uses the identical process. Information will need to be provided for the onboarding, starting with the deployment subscription, which we can get from the Azure tenant. This is done by going to the Azure tenant's subscriptions and choosing the relevant subscription for the deployment. Here we have these two subscriptions. We want to do the deployment for the second one, so we copy its ID. Back in the Elements portal, we paste the ID to the first field. Then we can choose the region we want for the deployment. Here we'll just use North Europe. Next, fill in the email addresses that will be used to notify the users in case the Event Hub's maximum capacity is reached. Click to open the user guide before you proceed. You'll need it shortly to copy commands to the Azure shells. Click Connect. We now get the option to download the onboarding file, so go ahead and click. Note that the contents of this file are based on the subscription that the user has. The file can contain the deployment scripts to either Identity Security or Azure workloads, or both of them, as we have in this demo user. The file name shows what products are included. We need to prepare two things to be able to deploy the resources in the Azure environment. The first is to go to the Azure portal, open the Properties page, and turn on Access Management for Azure resources. On this demo, it's already enabled. And second, we have to ensure that the user that we're using to deploy the resources in our Azure environment has global admin privileges. To check that, we can go to the Users page, select the user, and ensure that the user has all needed privileges in assigned roles. Open the Azure Cloud Shell via the button on the top ribbon. We recommend extending the window for ease of use. Next, you need to upload the deployment scape. Click the Manage Files button and choose Upload. Select the file downloaded from the Elements Security Center and upload it. Extract the file by using the unzip command. Then, we go to the WithSecure folder and clear the terminal for better visibility. The owner role needs to be assigned to the user executing the deployment. To do that, we use the command from the user guide window we opened earlier. Remember to replace the user ID with the correct one. We now have permission on the root level for the user and can start the deployment. We'll clear again for visibility. After that, it's time to deploy. Just write ./deploy.ps1. Then press Enter. The deployment generates a config file and checks the active subscriptions and locations of the tenant. This will take a few seconds. Then we can see the configuration is done and deployment will start soon after. This may take from 10 to 15 minutes, so it's a good time to stretch your legs or grab a cup of coffee. Or both. Please remember to check the post-deployment verification section in the guide to ensure the connections have been set up successfully. After processing, you'll see that the deployment has been completed, and there will be connection strings or secrets depending on the number of regions you have for the tenant. Now, let's return to the Elements Security Center. The next step is to copy each secret one by one to the connection string text box and click Add before adding the next one. Each connection string is related to a region for the Event Hub. Once you have added all connection strings, click Confirm. Complete the setup and wait for the connections to establish. Here it should be noted that the portal doesn't know which onboarding file we have used. Thus, after doing the deployment, we have to mark the files as deployed, as we have just downloaded the most recent ones. If a new release of the onboarding script comes later, we'll get the message again in the portal, and from that we will know that there is a new update and that deployment may need to be redone. Do a refresh to verify that the status has been updated. If you first installed one product, for example, Identity Security, and later want to add another product, just follow the steps again from the start, downloading the onboarding script for both, removing the old installation files from Azure Shell, and redoing the onboarding from the start. Now, the deployment is complete. For further information, again, please see the links to the user guides, our support site, and our training resources in the video description. Thank you for watching.